Hello friends. Welcome to the DXD Tales. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was the primordial knight who car. Read The Blade of Infinity Issei x Xenovia x Rias Gremory. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Echoes of Eternity. The dream always began the same way, with stars dying. Issei Hyodo watched helplessly as constellations collapsed like burning houses of cards, their ancient light snuffed out in violent bursts that rippled across the fabric of reality. The cosmos itself seemed to scream, a sound beyond hearing that nonetheless reverberated through his very essence. In the dream, he wasn't simply witnessing this apocalypse, he was feeling it, as if each extinguished star was a nerve ending being severed from his own body. Again, a voice commanded from everywhere and nowhere. Issei's dream self raised a weapon that felt impossibly family. A blade that seemed to exist in multiple places simultaneously, its edge not merely cutting through space but through the concept of existence itself. It hummed with energies that predated the universe, resonating with something primal within him. The void comes. You must remember who you are. Before he could respond, the dream shattered like glass, and Issei bolted upright in his bed, gasping for air. Morning sunlight streamed through his window, the mundane reality of his bedroom a jarring contrast to the cosmic destruction he'd witnessed moments before. Sweat soaked his shirt, and Hi's heart hammered against his ribs with such force he wondered if it might crack bone. Third time this week, he muttered, pressing the heels of his palms against his eyes. His clock read 6:17 a.m., 13 minutes before his alarm was set to go off. With a resigned sigh, Issei swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. No point trying to go back to sleep now. The dreams always left him feeling hollow yet somehow heavier, as if something vast had been emptied out of him only to be replaced with lead. The mirror above his dresser revealed a face he barely recognized anymore, brown eyes that seemed older than his 17 years, with flecks of gold that hadn't been there a month ago. His normally unruly hair had developed a strange habit of settling into perfect order regardless of how he slept. And his movements carried an unconscious precision that drew confused looks from his parents. "Just who are you becoming?" he asked his reflection, not really expecting an answer. The face staring back offered no insights. But somewhere deep in his mind, something ancient stirred in response. Huo Academy sprawled across its campus like a European cathedral transplanted into Japanese soil, all Gothic spires and elegant stonework that had intimidated Issei when he'd first arrived as a freshman. Now in his second year, he navigated its hallways with an unconscious grace, his body moving with efficiency that belied the chaos in his mind. "Hyodo-kun, wait up." Issei turned to see Motohama and Matsuda rushing toward him, their expressions bearing the unmistakable excitement that usually preceded some new perverted scheme. Once, he would have shared their enthusiasm without hesitation. Now, their adolescent obsessions seemed quaint. "Morning," he offered with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Dude, what's with you lately?" Matsuda demanded, adjusting his glasses. "You've been walking around like some kind of zombie for weeks." Motohama nodded vigorously. "Yeah, and you completely ignored us when we told you about the new peephole we found in the Kendo Club changing room." "Sorry," Issei replied, feeling anything but. "Just haven't been sleeping well." "Well, snap out of it," Matsuda said, clapping him on the shoulder. "The girls are changing for morning practice right now, and I think I'll pass today," Issei interrupted, surprising even himself. The words had emerged before he'd consciously decided to speak them. His friends stared at him as if he'd just announced he was actually a talking fish. "You'll pass," Motohama repeated incredulously, on seeing Murayama's perfect 82.4 cm breasts. "Who are you, and what have you done with the real Issei?" A question that hits closer to home than you realize, Issei thought. "Just not feeling it today," he said with a shrug. "I'll catch you guys at lunch." He turned and walked away, leaving his friends gaping in his wake. Their confusion was understandable. Until recently, Issei had been as enthusiastic about their perverted antics as they were. The three had earned a reputation as the perverted trio, a title Issei had worn with perverse pride. Now, something fundamental had shifted within him. The change had begun with the dreams a month ago, but it went deeper than mere nocturnal disturbances. He felt as if he were becoming a stranger in his own skin, or perhaps, more disturbingly, as if he were remembering what his skin had contained all along. The school bell chimed, and Issei headed toward his classroom, unaware of the crimson-haired figure watching him from a third-floor window. Her blue-green eyes narrowed in calculation. Hyodo Issei. The name rolled off Rias Gremory's tongue with deliberate precision as she studied the file in front of her. School records, family history, medical information, all perfectly ordinary, yet the energy signature she detected from him was anything but. "What do we know about him?" she asked, looking up at her vice president. Akano Himahima, standing beside Rias's desk in the Occult Research Club room, tilted her head thoughtfully. On paper, completely unremarkable, average grades, no notable talents. Part of the school's infamous, perverted trio. His only distinction is a particularly unfiltered appreciation for the female form. And yet, Rias murmured, tapping a manicured nail against the wooden desk. And yet, Akano agreed, the energy surge we detected last night centered precisely on his home. Whatever power awakened was enough to momentarily disrupt my barrier spells. Rias leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking softly as she considered the implications. As heiress to the Gremory clan and de facto administrator of supernatural activity in Kuo, any anomalous energy signatures were her concern. But this wasn't merely unusual, it was unprecedented. It felt old, she said finally. Older than devil magic, older than anything I've encountered. Akano's expression remained composed, but her eyes betrayed her unease. Could it be connected to the recent fallen angel sightings? Perhaps. Rias stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the school grounds below. Or perhaps they're drawn to whatever he carries, just as we are. The crimson-haired devil had built her peerage carefully, selecting individuals with unique potential and giving them new life as her servants. Each addition had been strategic, calculated to strengthen her position in the complex political landscape of the underworld. But something about Hyodo Issei transcended mere strategy. The power she'd sensed was not just valuable, it was fundamentally different from anything in her experience. And difference, in the rigidly hierarchical world of devils, could be either an incredible asset or a dangerous liability. We'll continue observing him, she decided. If the fallen make a move, we'll intervene. Until then, I want to see what emerges naturally. Akano bowed slightly. As you wish, Bushu. As her vice president left to inform the rest of the peerage, Rias returned her attention to the file, studying the unremarkable photograph of Issei Hyodo with renewed intensity. The boy in the picture looked back with an ordinary smile, giving no hint of the anomalous energy she'd detected. Who are you really? She whispered to the photograph. And what are you becoming? The park was deserted as twilight descended, painting the sky in watercolor smears of indigo and vermilion. Issei walked alone, his school bag slung over one shoulder, trying to clear his mind of the strange dissociative fog that had plagued him all day. He'd declined another invitation from Matsuda and Motohama, unable to muster enthusiasm for their planned excursion to buy the latest issue of a particularly explicit magazine. The disappointment in their eyes had been palpable, but something in Issei had shifted irrevocably. The old obsessions felt hollow now, as if they'd belonged to someone else entirely. A cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. Issei paused beside the central fountain, watching the water cascade in hypnotic patterns that momentarily quieted the chaos in his mind. In that moment of peace, he failed to notice the figure approaching from behind until she spoke. "Excuse me, are you Hyodo Issei-kun?" He turned to find a girl roughly his age with long black hair and violet eyes, wearing an unfamiliar school uniform. Something in her smile set off alarm bells in his mind. It was too perfect, too practiced. Like a mask carefully constructed to disarm. "Yes," he answered cautiously, an uncharacteristic wariness creeping into his voice. The girl's smile widened, revealing perfect teeth. "I'm Yuma Amano. I've seen you passing by here often, and, well," she looked down shyly, a blush coloring her cheeks. "I was wondering if you might want to go out with me." A month ago, such a propositee would have sent Issei into paroxysms of joy. Now, he merely studied her with growing unease. There was something fundamentally wrong about her presence, like a predator trying to mimic prey. "Have we met before?" he asked, the question emerging unbidden. Surprise flickered across Yuma's features before her mask of innocence reasserted itself. "No, I don't think so. I would remember meeting someone like you." As she spoke, the fountain behind them suddenly sputtered and went dry. In the abrupt silence, Issei became aware of a strange pressure building in the air, as if reality itself were straining against some invisible constraint. "That's strange," Yuma commented, glancing at the fountain. It was just. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she looked back at Issei. For a moment, neither of them moved, locked in a tableau of mutual recognition, predator realizing its prey was something else entirely, prey acknowledging the hunter in their midst. Then Yuma smiled again, but the pretense of humanity had vanished. Her violet eyes hardened to amethyst chips of malice. "Well," she said, her voice dropping to a register that scraped against Issei's nerves like rusted metal, "this is inconvenient. You weren't supposed to be awakening yet." The air around her shimmered, and her school uniform dissolved into strips of black leather that barely covered her suddenly mature form. Great black wings erupted from her back, spanning nearly 12 feet from tip to tip. "My name is Rainer," she announced, hovering several feet above the ground, "and you, Hyodo Issei, have become a problem that needs solving." Light coalesced in her palm, forming a crackling spear of energy that hummed with malevolent purpose. Issei stood transfixed, not in fear but in a strange state of detached analysis. Some part of him, the ordinary high school student, screamed in terror, but another part, something ancient and awakening, merely noted the fallen angel's stance, the composition of her light spear, the pattern of her wing beats. "This would have been so much easier if you'd just accepted my date invitation," Rainer sighed theatrically. "A quick kiss, a quicker death, you'd never have known what hit you. Now I'll have to make this messy." She hurled the light spear directly at Issei's heart with deadly precision. Time seemed to slow. In the microsecond before the spear struck, something inside Issei shattered, not his body, but a barrier within his mind. Memories cascaded through the breach, stars being born and dying, battles across dimensions, a blade that cut through reality itself. A name echoed in the depths of his consciousness, not Hyodo Issei but something older, something that had existed when the universe was young. His hand moved of its own accord, fingers splaying in a precise gesture he somehow remembered performing countless times before. The air before him rippled and hardened, and Rainer's light spear struck an invisible barrier, ITS energy dispersing in a shower of luminescent particles. The fallen angel's confident expression collapsed into shock. "Impossible," she breathed. "You're just a human." Issei looked down at his hand, equally surprised. "Am I?" he murmured, the question directed more at himself than at her. Rainer recovered quickly, her face contorting with rage as she summoned another light spear, larger than the first. "Whatever you are, you'll die all the same." She hurled the second spear with even greater force, but this time, Issei didn't merely block it. His right hand swept upward in a fluid arc, and something materialized within his grip, the ghost of a sword, its edges blurred and indistinct but unmistakably real. With one precise movement, he sliced through the incoming spear, cleaving it into harmless fragments of light that dissolved before touching the ground. The phantom blade in his hand pulsed once, becoming momentarily more substantial, a long, straight sword with strange symbol etched along its length before fading back to translucence. Issei stared at it in wonder, feeling a profound sense of rightness in its weight and balance. "The blade," he whispered, the name coming to him from somewhere beyond memory. Rainer hovered above, her confidence shattered but her survival instinct intact. "What are you?" she demanded, her voice edged with fear. Issei looked up, and for a brief moment, his eyes flashed with golden light that illuminated the growing darkness. "I don't know yet," he answered honestly. "But I'm beginning to remember." The fallen angel backed away, wings beating frantically. "This isn't over," she hissed. "We'll find out what you are, and then we'll destroy you properly." Before Issei could respond, she vanished into the night sky, leaving him alone in the empty park with the ghostly sword still clutched in his hand. As his adrenaline ebbed, the blade grew fainter until it disappeared entirely, leaving only the memory of its weight and an inexplicable sense of loss. He stared at his empty palm, trying to process what had just happened. The strange dissociation that had plagued him for weeks suddenly made perfect sense. He had been becoming someone else because he had always been someone else. Hyodo Issei was merely the most recent incarnation of something far older. The Primordial Knight, he murmured, the title rising from the depths of his newly awakened memories. The bearer of the Blade of Infinity. In the distance, thunder rumbled across the darkening sky, as if the heavens themselves were acknowledging his declaration. From the shadow of a nearby oak tree, Rias Gremory watched the encounter with wide eyes, her usual composure momentarily abandoned. When she'd sensed the fallen angel approaching Issei, she'd prepared to intervene, only to witness something unprecedented. The boy had not only defended himself against a fallen angel but had manifested a weapon unlike anything in her considerable magical knowledge. The energy signature it emitted was ancient beyond reckoning, resonating with fundamental forces that predated the Great War, perhaps even creation itself. Most disturbing of all was the brief moment when Issei's entire demeanor had changed. His stance, his movements, even the cadence of his speech shifting to something that felt impossibly old and frighteningly powerful. This was no ordinary sacred gear awakening. This was something else entirely. Rias pulled out her phone and dialed a number, her eyes never leaving Issei as he stood alone in the gathering darkness. "Akano," she said when her vice president answered. "Prepare the transportation circle, and contact my brother. Tell him I've found something he needs to see." Issei didn't remember walking home. One moment he was standing in the park, staring at his empty hand. The next, he was standing outside his house, key poised to unlock the front door. The intervening journey had dissolved into a blur of automatic movement while his mind grappled with the implications of what had occurred. He was not who he'd thought he was. That much seemed clear, but the full truth remained maddeningly elusive, hovering just beyond the reach of his conscious mind. "I'm home," he called out reflexively as he entered, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "Welcome back," his mother replied from the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready." The normalcy of the exchange felt surreal after what he'd experienced. Issei stood in the entryway, suddenly overwhelmed by the contrast between his mundane life and the cosmic revelations pounding at the gates of his consciousness. "Are you coming in?" his mother called again. "Your father's already at the table." "Coming," he managed, forcing his body into motion. Dinner passed in a haze, his parents' conversation washing over him without registering. He responded to direct questions with monosyllables, pushing food around his plate without tasting it. If his parents noticed his distraction, they attributed it to typical teenage preoccupation. After excusing himself, Issei retreated to his room and sat on the edge of his bed, palms pressed against his eyes as if he could physically hold back the flood of alien memories threatening to overwhelm him. "Focus," he muttered to himself. "What do I know for certain?" 1. A winged woman, Rainer, she'd called herself, had tried to kill him. 2. He had defended himself with abilities he shouldn't possess. 3. He had manifested some kind of spectral sword that felt more familiar than his own name. Everything else, the fragments of cosmic memory, the title that had sprung to his lips, the sense of an ancient identity awakening, remained nebulous, more intuition than concrete knowledge. With a deep breath, Issei extended his right hand and concentrated, trying to recapture the sensation he'd experienced in the park. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, just as he was about to give up, a flicker of energy danced across his palm. "Come," he whispered, the command feeling right somehow. The air rippled, and the ghostly outline of the sword materialized in his grip, fainter than before but undeniably present. Symbols etched along its blade pulsed with soft light, characters from no earthly language that nonetheless seemed perfectly legible to him. "The Blade of Infinity," he read aloud, the name sending a shock of recognition through his system. As if responding to his recognition, the sword briefly solidified, its translucent form gaining substance and weight for several heartbeats before fading back to either reality. The momentary connection sent another cascade of fractured memories through Issei's mind. Vast battles across realities, civilizations rising and falling like tides. The sword in his hand cleaving through the fabric of existence itself. The visions were overwhelming, forcing him to release his concentration. The spectral blade dissolved, leaving him gasping on the edge of his bed. sweat beading his forehead despite the cool evening air. This is real, he whispered to the empty room. This is happening. Sleep, when it finally came, was troubled by dreams. More vivid than ever before. Not just stars dying now, but entire universes collapsing, and through it all, a presence of absolute emptiness advancing inexorably toward everything that existed. The void. The name came to him unbidden, carrying with it a primal dread that transcended ordinary fear. And something else. A sense of responsibility so profound it felt embedded in his very atoms. Whatever the primordial night had been, whatever Issei was becoming, its purpose had been to stand against that encroaching nothingness. To guard the boundaries of reality itself. Morning arrived Ith merciful ordinariness. Sunlight filtering through curtains, birds chirping outside his window, the distant sounds of his parents preparing for their day. Issei lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling simultaneously exhausted and more alert than he'd ever been. The memories that had crashed through him the previous night had settled somewhat, no longer threatening to drown him but instead a strange parallel consciousness alongside his 17 years of human experience. It was as if he were two people simultaneously, Hyodo Issei, ordinary high school student, and something far older that had no name in any human language. He showered and dressed mechanically, noting with detached interest how his movements had changed overnight, more efficient, more precise, as if his body were gradually remembering patterns of movement honed across eons. Issei-kun, are you feeling all right? His mother asked as he entered the kitchen. You look pale. I'm fine, he assured her with a smile that felt foreign on his face. Just didn't sleep well. You've been saying that a lot lately, she noted, concern creasing her brow. Maybe we should see a doctor. No doctor could diagnose what's happening to me, he thought but merely nodded. If it continues, we will. He ate breakfast without tasting it, his mind preoccupied with practical concerns. The fallen angel, Rainer, knew what he was, or at least suspected. She would return, likely with reinforcements. He needed to prepare, to accelerate the awakening of his abilities before they came for him again. And there was the OT. Her matter, the crimson-haired girl he'd glimpsed watching him from the shadows of the park. He hadn't mentioned her to himself until now, but some part of him had registered her presence, had sensed the power she contained. Not angelic or fallen, but something else entirely. I'm heading out, he announced, standing from the table. So early? His father asked, looking up from his newspaper. School doesn't start for an hour. I want to stop by the library first, Issei improvised. Research for a project. His parents exchanged surprised glances. Their son had never shown such academic initiative before, but nodded their approval. As Issei left the house, he felt a pang of guilt at the deception. His parents had raised him with love and care, believing him to be their ordinary son. What would they think if they knew the truth? Did he even know the truth himself? The morning air was crisp with early autumn chill, the neighborhood quiet as he made his way towards school. Instead of heading directly there, however, Issei turned toward the park where he'd encountered Rainer. Some instinct told him it was important to return to the site of his awakening. The fountain stood silent in the morning light, its waters once again flowing smoothly as if nothing unusual had occurred. Issei approached it slowly, extending his senses in a way that felt both novel and deeply familiar. Yes, there, traces of energy lingered in the air, remnants of Rainer's light spears and his own awakening power. More interesting were the residual signatures near the oak tree where the crimson-haired observer had stood. The energy felt ancient but not primordial, powerful but constrained within established patterns. Devil energy, he murmured, the knowledge surfacing from his parallel consciousness. High class. Very good, a female voice commented from behind him. Your perceptive abilities are impressive. Issei turned slowly, unsurprised to find the crimson-haired girl standing a few meters away. She wore the Kuo Academy uniform with an elegance that spoke of aristocratic breeding, her striking blue-green eyes regarding him with calculated interest. Rias Gremory, he said, the name coming to him from his ordinary memories. The school Madonna, as she was called, a third-year student renowned for her beauty and academic excellence. She inclined her head slightly. And you're Hyodo Issei, though I suspect that's not all you are. What do you want? He asked directly, seeing no point in pretending ignorance. Rias approached with measured steps, her posture relaxed but alert. Initially, to save you from the fallen angel. But you handled that situation quite effectively on your own. And now I'm curious. She stopped a few paces away, studying him with undisguised interest. What you did last night wasn't a sacred gear awakening. It wasn't devil magic, or angel magic, or any known supernatural system. It was something else entirely. Issei considered his response carefully. This Rias Gremory was clearly powerful in her own right, and potentially valuable as an ally against Rainer's inevitable return. But instinct cautioned him against revealing too much too soon. I'm still figuring that out myself, he said finally, which was true enough. Rias nodded as if she'd expected this answer. The fallen angels won't give you much time to figure it out. They'll be back, and in greater numbers. I know. I can offer you protection, she continued. And resources to help you understand what's happening to you. Issei raised an eyebrow. In exchange for what? A smile curved Rias's lips, appreciative of his directness. Let's call it a mutual exchange of information and assistance. I help you, you help me. The specifics can be negotiated. Again, Issei felt the strange duality of his consciousness at work, the ordinary high schooler tempted to accept help from the beautiful senior, and the ancient entity wary of entangling itself in the politics of younger supernatural races. I'll consider it, he said finally. But I need time. Time is precisely what you may not have, Rias countered, her expression growing serious. The Fa. Yen angels who tried to kill you serve Gregory, their organization's leadership. If they've targeted you, they have a reason. They think I'm dangerous. Are they wrong? The question hung in the air between them. Deceptively simple yet profound in its implications. Issei looked down at his hand, remembering the weight of the spectral blade, the flood of cosmic memories that accompanied it. No, he admitted quietly. They're not wrong. Rias nodded, seeming satisfied with his honesty. Then my offer stands. When you're ready to talk further, come to the old school building after classes. Ask for the Occult Research Club. She turned to leave, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. One more thing, Issei-kun. Whatever you're becoming, it's affecting the boundary layers around Kuo. Be careful with that power of yours. Not everything that might notice it will be as friendly as I am. With that cryptic warning, she walked away, her crimson hair catching the morning sunlight like living flame. Issei watched her go, wondering if he'd just made an ally or committed himself to a game whose rules he didn't yet understand. Perhaps both. The school bell chimed in the distance, reminding him of his other life, the one where he was simply Hyodo Issei, second-year high school student. For now, at least, he would maintain that facade, if only to give himself time to integrate the fractured memories and growing powers that threatened to redefine his existence. As he turned toward school, he felt the phantom weight of the blade of infinity at his side, not physically present but somehow always with him. Waiting to be called forth again when needed. And something told him it would be needed very soon. The school day passed in a blur of normalcy that felt increasingly surreal to Issei. He sat through lectures, took notes, answered questions when called upon, all while a parallel stream of cosmic memories continued to integrate with his consciousness. Moto, Hama and Matsuda avoided him after a perfunctory greeting, clearly still confused by his recent behavior changes. Issei caught snippets of their conversation at lunch, speculation that he might be ill. Or perhaps had secretly begun dating someone. The latter theory particularly amused him, given the actual circumstances. More concerning were the occasional pulses of awareness that flickered through his developing senses, brief impressions of supernatural presences observing him from a distance. Some felt similar to Rias Gremory's energy signature, devils, he presumed, likely members of her group. Others were less distinct but carried the unmistakable resonance of fallen angels. He was being watched from multiple directions, which suggested his situation was even more precarious than he'd initially believed. As the final bell rang, Issei packed his bag with deliberate slowness, considering his options. Rias Gremory's offer of assistance was tempting, but accepting it would inevitably bind him to her agenda. Whatever that might be, the devil aristocracy was notoriously political, with complex webs of alliance and obligation that stretched back millennia. Yet facing Rainer and her allies alone, with only partially awakened abilities and fragmented memories, seemed equally unwise. Decision made, Issei shouldered his bag and headed toward the old-school building that housed the Occult Research Club. The structure stood apart from the main campus, partially obscured by ancient trees whose branches seemed to protectively encircle its Victorian architecture. As he approached the entrance, a strange sensation washed over him, a complex magical barrier, he realized, designed to repel ordinary humans while remaining invisible to supernatural awareness. To his enhanced perception, it appeared as a shimmering veil of interlocking sigils and energy patterns. Impressive work, though primitive compared to the dimensional barriers he vaguely remembered creating in another life. The door opened before he could knock, revealing a petite white-haired girl who regarded him with expressionless amber eyes. "Hyodo Issei," she stated flatly. Not a question. "Yes," he confirmed. "Rias Gremory invited me." The girl nodded once and stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. "Bushu is expecting you." The interior of the building carried the atmosphere of a previous century, ornate woodwork, vintage furniture. Gas lamps retrofitted with electric bulbs that cast a warm, flickering light across the hallway. The girl led him silently to a large wooden door at the corridor's end, knocked twice. Then opened it without waiting for a response. "He's here," she announced, then disappeared back down the hallway before Issei could thank her. The room beyond was spacious and elegant, a high-ceilinged chamber furnished as a Victorian salon, with leather couches, bookshelves lining the walls, and a large desk positioned near tall windows that overlooked the school grounds. Rias Gremory sat behind the desk, while three others occupied various positions around the room. "Issei-kun," Rias greeted him with a smile that didn't quite reach her calculating eyes. "I'm glad you decided to join us. I'm still considering your offer," he clarified, stepping into the room. "This is just a conversation." "Of course." Rias gestured to the others present. "Allow me to introduce my peerage. This is Akano Himahima, my queen." A beautiful girl with long black hair tied in a ponytail bowed slightly, her violet eyes assessing him with undisguised curiosity. Era, so this is the mysterious Hyodo-kun. You've caused quite a stir." "Kiba Yuto, my knight," Rias continued, indicating a handsome blonde boy who offered a friendly nod. "Nice to meet you," Kiba said with a smile that seemed genuine enough. "And Kaneko Tuju, my rook, whom you've already met." The white-haired girl who had answered the door was now perched on one of the couches, a half-eaten cookie in her hand. She acknowledged the introduction with the barest inclination of her head. "Your peerage," Issei repeated, the term triggering another fragment of memory. "Your servants, bound through the evil peace system." Surprise flickered across Rias's face before she composed herself. "You're familiar with Devil Society's structures." "I'm remembering things," Issei said carefully. "Knowledge that wasn't mine before, but somehow is now." "Fascinating." Rias leaned forward, resting her chin on interlaced fingers. "And what else are you remembering, Issei-kun?" He met her gaze steadily. "Out to know that the fallen angels aren't the only ones with an agenda concerning me." Akano laughed softly at this, while Kiba's smile took on a more respectful quality. Even Kaneko seemed to regard him with marginally increased interest. "Direct and perceptive," Rias acknowledged. "Yes, I have an interest in your abilities. But unlike the fallen angels, I'm not trying to kill you." "No," Issei agreed. "You're trying to recruit me." Quote. Rias didn't deny it. "As that's so terrible. You need allies, Issei-kun. Whatever power you're awakening, it's drawing attention from multiple factions. Alone, you're vulnerable. And as part of your peerage, I'd be what? Protected. Or controlled. Both," Rias admitted with surprising candor. "The relationship between a devil and their peerage members is complex. I would have authority over you, yes, but also responsibility for your well-being and development." Issei considered this, weighing it against his fragmentary understanding of his own nature. Something told him that becoming a devil, being reincarnated through the evil peace system, might interfere with the awakening of his primordial abilities. Yet outright rejection of Rias's offer would leave him isolated against mounting threats. "I appreciate your honesty," he said finally. "But I can't become part of your peerage. Not now, possibly not ever." Rather than anger, Rias's expression showed renewed interest. "You believe it would be incompatible with your nature?" "Yes." Then we find ourselves at an impasse. Not necessarily, Issei countered. There are other forms of alliance besides master and servant. Rias raised an elegant eyebrow. Such as mutual assistance between equals. I help you, you help me, without subordination on either side. A brief silence fell over the room as Rias considered this proposal. Her peerage members remained still, awaiting her response. Bold, she said finally, a hint of admiration in her voice. And unprecedented. Devils don't typically form equal alliances with, well, whatever you are. Unprecedented doesn't mean impossible. No, it doesn't. Rias stood and walked around her desk, approaching Issei with measured steps. But it does require extraordinary circumstances. I would need to know more about what I'm allying myself with. Issei nodded. That's fair. I'm still piecing it together myself, but I can tell you what I know so far. He took a deep breath, organizing the fragments of memory and knowledge that had coalesced over the past 24 hours. I'm remembering another existence, one that predates the current supernatural order. Before angels, devils, and fallen angels. Before the God of the Bible and the various pantheons. My consciousness carries memories of a being called the Primordial Knight, who wielded a weapon known as the Blade of Infinity. As he spoke, Issei extended his right hand, concentrating on the sensation he'd experienced in the park. The air shimmered, and the ghost's outline of the sword materialized in his grip, more substantial than before but still not fully physical. Gasps echoed around the room. Akino's eyes widened, Kiba leaned forward with professional interest, and even Kaneko abandoned her impassive expression for one of surprise. This blade exists simultaneously across multiple dimensions, Issei continued, the knowledge flowing more easily now. It can cut through not just physical matter but the fabric of reality itself. And its purpose, my purpose, was to guard the boundaries of existence against something called the void. Rias circled the spectral weapon, her expression a mixture of awe and calculation. I've never encountered anything like this. The energy signature is primordial, as you said. It predates any magical system I'm familiar with. Because it isn't magic, Issei explained, the distinction suddenly clear to him. Magic manipulates existing laws of reality. This transcends those laws entirely. He released his concentration, allowing the blade to dissolve back into nothingness. The effort of maintaining its partial manifestation had drained him more than he wanted to admit. You said, Rias noted. He Primordial Knight's purpose was to guard against this void. What happened? Issei frowned, probing at the edges of memories that remained frustratingly out of reach. I don't know yet. There was a conflict, a cosmic war of some kind. The blade was fractured, its pieces scattered across dimensions. And the consciousness of the knight was diminished, perhaps intentionally hidden away. Until now, Rias concluded. Until it began awakening in you. Yes. Why now? And why you specifically? Issei shook his head. Those are the questions I need answers to. Along with what the fallen angels know about all this. And why they tried to kill me. Rias exchanged glances with Akino, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then she turned back to Issei with newfound resolution. I believe you, she said. And I accept your proposal for an alliance between equals, at least provisionally. My peerage and I will help you discover the truth about your nature and protect you from the fallen angels. In return, I'll assist you with matters requiring my particular abilities, Issei finished for her. And share what I learn about the primordial era as my memories continue to awaken. Exactly. Rias extended her hand. Do we have an agreement? Issei hesitated only briefly before clasping her offered hand. The moment their skin touched, a curious resonance asked between them, not a formal magical contract, but something more fundamental, as if reality itself were acknowledging their pact. Rias felt it too, her eyes widening slightly before she composed herself. Well, she said, releasing his hand, that was unexpected. What just happened? Kiba asked, looking between them. A recognition, Issei said, the knowledge surfacing from his deeper consciousness. Between her devil power and my, whatever I am. They've acknowledged each other. Fascinating, Akino murmured. Bushu, does this mean? Whatever she was about to ask was interrupted by a sudden crash as the club room's windows imploded, showering the occupants with glass shards. Issei reacted instinctively, sweeping his hand in an arc that created a barrier of shimmering energy. To protect himself and the devils from the debris, through the shattered windows flew 3 figures with black feathered wings, fallen angels, their hands already crackling with light spears. Found you. Rainer's voice rang out triumphantly. And with the Gremory girl, no less. 2 problems solved with 1 attack. Rias stepped forward, crimson energy gathering around her hands. You dare attack devil territory? This is an act of war, fallen one. Worth the risk to eliminate this abomination before it fully awakens, Rainer replied, her violet eyes fixed on Issei. Our leaders have recognized what he is, what he carries. The old powers must remain dormant for all our sakes. Issei felt a surge of anger at being discussed as an object rather than a person. The emotion triggered another cascade of awakening power. And this time, when he extended his hand, the blade of infinity materialized with far greater solidity than before. I'm not an abomination, he stated, his voice resonating with power that belied his youthful appearance. I am the Primordial Knight, bearer of the blade of infinity, guardian of the boundaries. And you, fallen angel, are trespassing on my watch. The declaration echoed with authority that transcended his 17 years of human life, drawing on the ancient consciousness that continued to awaken within him. For a moment, everyone in the room, devils and fallen angels alike, fell silent, sensing the weight of ages behind his words. Then Rainer laughed, though the sound held a brittle edge of uncertainty. Pretty speech, but you're still just a fragment of what you once were. And we are 3 against, well, a handful of low-class devils and a half-awakened relic. You underestimate us, Rias said coldly, her crimson energy intensifying. And him. Issei stepped forward, the blade of infinity humming with anticipation in his grip. The sword felt more real with each passing moment, its symbols glowing with inner light that cast NGE shadows across the destroyed club room. Last chance, he offered Rainer and her companions. Leave now, and we can avoid unnecessary violence. The fallen angel's response was to hurl a light spear directly at his face. Issei didn't bother with a barrier this time. He simply sliced the spear in half with a casual flick of the blade, its energies dissolving into harmless particles. I guess that's a no, he sighed, and launched himself forward with inhuman speed. The battle that followed was brief but intense. Kiba moved with blinding velocity, his devil-enhanced speed complemented by the sword that materialized in his hand. Akeno took to the air, lightning crackling between her fingertips as she engaged one of Rainer's companions. Kaneko, despite her diminutive size, demonstrated shocking physical strength, hurling furniture with devastating accuracy. And Rias unleashed waves of destructive energy that spoke to her status as a high-class devil, her power distinctive and refined. But it was Issei who commanded the room's attention. The blade of infinity moved through space as if friction and resistance were merely optional, cutting through light spears, barriers, and eventually through the wing of Rainer herself when she made the mistake of diving too close. The fallen angel screamed in pain and outrage as black feathers drifted to the floor, her severed wing dissolving into particles of light. This isn't over, she shrieked, retreating through the shattered window with her wounded companions. The Gremory will never allow the Primordial Knight to awaken fully. As their enemies fled, Issei lowered the blade, which pulsed once with satisfaction before fading back to transparency. The effort of maintaining it in near physical form for the duration of the battle left him lightheaded. And he swayed slightly where he stood. Rias was at his side in an instant, her hand on his arm to steady him. Are you all right? Yes, he managed, though exhaustion pulled at his limbs. Still adjusting to channeling this power. She guided him to one of the intact couches, and he sank onto it gratefully. The other members of the Occult Research Club gathered around, regarding him with expressions ranging from curiosity to newfound respect. That was, Kiba began, then shook his head, apparently at a loss for words. Impressive, Akeno finished for him, her usual teasing tone subdued. I've never seen anything like that sword technique. Issei smiled weakly. Neither have I, to be honest. My body remembers more than my mind does at this point. Your declaration, Rias said thoughtfully. Guardian of the boundaries. What did you mean by that? Issei looked down at his hands, flexing fingers that still tingled with residual energy from wielding the blade. The boundaries between dimensions, between reality and void. That was the Primordial Knight's purpose, to maintain the integrity of existence itself against forces that would unmake it. Forces like what? Kaneko asked, speaking directly to him for the first time. The void, Issei replied, the name sending a chill through him even as he spoke it. An emptiness that exists beyond all creation, constantly pressing against the boundaries of reality. If those boundaries weaken, he didn't need to finish the thought. The implications were clear enough, the unmaking of everything that existed. And now the fallen angels want to prevent you from fulfilling this purpose, Rias said, her brow furrowed in thought. Why? Surely protecting reality benefits everyone. Unless they know something we don't, Akeno suggested, or fear what his full awakening might mean for the current balance of power. Issei nodded slowly. Rainer mentioned leaders, the Gremory. Why must have records or knowledge about the primordial era that explain their hostility. Then we need to find out what they know, Rias decided, her expression hardening with determination. And quickly, before they return in greater numbers. As the devils began discussing strategies and security measures, Issei leaned back on the couch, feeling the weight of his emerging identity pressing down upon him. The Primordial Knight, the bearer of the Blade of Infinity, guardian of the boundaries, titles that carried responsibilities he was only beginning to comprehend. Yet beneath these cosmic burdens, he remained Hyodo Issei, a 17-year-old boy with ordinary parents, school obligations, and the usual adolescent concerns. Reconciling these two existences would be his greatest challenge in the days to come. As if sensing his thoughts, Rias paused in her planning to look at him with unexpected gentleness. One step at a time, Issei-kun. We'll face this together, as allies. He met her gaze, finding genuine concern beneath her calculating exterior. Whatever her ultimate agenda might be, in this moment at least, her support seemed sincere. Together, he agreed, and felt the phantom weight of the Blade of Infinity stir in acknowledgement. Outside, twilight deepened into night, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. And somewhere in the vast cosmos beyond, Somethi, ancient and terrible, took notice of a power it had not sensed in eons, the reawakening of its oldest adversary, the Primordial Knight who had once driven it back into the outer darkness. The void was patient, it could wait a little longer. But not much longer. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Echoes of Duty. The underworld didn't look like hell. Issei stood at the edge of a sweeping balcony, hands resting on smooth marble as he surveyed the landscape spreading before him. Rolling emerald hills punctuated by crystalline lakes. Distant mountains whose peaks glittered with what appeared to be genuine diamond. A sprawling city whose architecture blended Gothic spires with impossible structures that seemed to defy gravity itself, all illuminated by a sky where purple and crimson intertwined in perpetual twilight. No fire, no brimstone, no tortured souls writhing in eternal agony. Disappointed? Rias asked, materializing beside him with a knowing smile. Surprised, Issei admitted. Human mythology got it wrong. Deliberately wrong. Most supernatural factions find it useful when mortals misunderstand their domains. She gestured toward the cityscape. Welcome to Lilith, capital of evil civilization and seat of the current Mao government. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Rainer and her fallen angel companions. 3 days of intensified training with his gradually awakening abilities. 3 days of planning and preparation before Rias had announced it was time to seek answers in the archives of Devil Society. My brother is expecting us, she continued, turning from the view. We shouldn't keep Mao waiting. Issei followed her back into the grand chamber that served as their arrival point. The teleportation circle that had transported them from the human world still glimmered faintly on the polished floor, intricate runic patterns gradually fading into dormancy. Your brother, he repeated, memories from their briefings surfacing. Searzex Lucifer, one of the 4 current Mao rulers. Correct, though he was born Searzex Gremory. The title of Lucifer is an office rather than a bloodline in the current system. They walked through corridors of impossible dimensions, spaces that seemed to expand and contract according to some non-Euclidean geometry that should have been disorienting but somehow made perfect sense to Issei's awakening perceptions. Devil servants bowed respectfully as they passed, their eyes lingering curiously on the human visitor accompanying their lord's sister. They're wondering what you are, Rias explained without being asked. Humans rarely visit this level of Devil Society, and never unaccompanied. Am I causing you political complications? Issei asked. She laughed, the sound echoing pleasantly through the hallway. Issei-kun, everything I do causes political complications. It's the nature of being a Gremory in the current climate. Before he could ask for clarification, they arrived at a set of doors that somehow conveyed importance without ostentation. Simple dark wood inlaid with silver traceries that moved subtly, like living things. The doors opened silently at their approach. Little sister. Right on time. The voice that greeted them carried warmth and power in equal measure. Xenovia Lucifer rose from behind an enormous desk carved from what appeared to be a single piece of obsidian. He shared his sister's crimson hair and striking features, though his power signature registered to Issei's senses as something vastly more complex, layers upon layers of compressed energy. Barely contained within his seemingly casual demeanor. Oni-sama, Rias replied with formal respect, though Issei caught the genuine affection beneath the protocol. Xenovia approached them with an easy stride, his attention shifting to Issei with undisguised curiosity. And this must be the young man who's causing such interesting ripples in the supernatural community. Hyodo Issei, Rias confirmed. Though that may be only part of who he is. The Mao extended his hand in the human manner. A pleasure to meet you, Hyodo Issei. I've been looking forward to this since Rias first contacted me about your unique circumstances. Issei accepted the handshake, noting how the devil carefully modulated his grip to match human strength. Thank you for agreeing to help us, Lucifer-sama. Please, call me Xenovia. At least in private. The Mao gestured toward comfortable seating arranged near a fireplace that burned with blue flames. Shall we discuss why you're here? As they settled into the offered chairs, a servant materialized with refreshments. Tea served in delicate porcelain for Rias and Issei, and something that glowed with inner light in a crystal goblet for Xenovia. Rias has shared the basics. Xenovia began once the servant had withdrawn. A human teenager manifesting powers that predate our current supernatural order. A connection to something called the Primordial Knight and a weapon known as the Blade of Infinity. Fallen angels attempting assassination rather than recruitment. He leaned forward slightly. What she couldn't explain is why. Issei took a careful sip of the tea, which tasted perfectly normal despite its exotic surroundings, before responding. My memories are still fragmented. I know what I am, or what I'm becoming, but not why it's happening now or why the fallen angels are so determined to stop it. Show him, Rias suggested. With a nod, Issei extended his right hand, concentrating on the now familiar sensation of calling forth the blade. The air shimmered, reality seeming to fold along invisible seams, and the sword materialized in his grip, more substantial than ever before, its edges sharp and defined, the strange symbols etched along its length pulsing with inner light. Xenovia went very still, his casual demeanor evaporating like morning mist. That's not possible. And yet, here it is, Rias noted. Mao rose from his seat and circled Issei slowly, studying the blade from multiple angles. His expression shifted from shock to fascination to something approaching reverence. The Blade of Infinity, he murmured. I've seen references to it in our oldest archives, texts so ancient they predate the Great War. Most scholars dismissed it as metaphorical, a conceptual weapon rather than a physical artifact. It's both, Issei explained, the knowledge flowing from that other part of his consciousness. It exists simultaneously across multiple dimensions, drawing its power from infinite possibilities. What you're seeing is just its manifestation in this particular reality. May I? Xenovia extended his hand toward the weapon. Issei hesitated, then nodded, releasing his grip on the hilt. The moment his fingers lost contact with the blade, it began to lose cohesion, its edges blurring. Fascinating, the Mao breathed, pulling his hand back. It's bound to you specifically. To the Primordial Knight, Issei corrected, allowing the blade to dissipate completely. I'm just the current vessel. Xenovia returned to his seat, his expression thoughtful. And the fallen angels tried to kill you before this awakening could progress further. That suggests they know something we don't about what the Primordial Knight represents. Which is why we've come, Rias interjected. We need access to the ancestral archives. There might be records from before the Great War that could explain what's happening and why the fallen are so afraid of it. Her brother's expression grew serious. The ancestral archives are restricted, Rias Even I need special dispensation from the other Mao to access the oldest sections. But you could arrange it. I could, he agreed, but it would raise questions. Questions that might attract precisely the kind of attention you're trying to avoid right now. A silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft crackling of the blue flames. Issei studied the Mao's expression, reading the calculations behind his outward concern. You're worried about more than just bureaucratic complications, he observed. You're worried about what we might find. Xenovia smiled, but there was no humor in it. Perceptive. Yes, Hyodo Issei, I am concerned. The pre-war era contains knowledge that was deliberately sealed away for good reasons. So, me secrets were judged too dangerous for any faction to possess. And you think the truth about the Primordial Night might be one of those secrets? I think, the Mao replied carefully, that N.Y. thing powerful enough to frighten the leadership of Gremory into assassination attempts rather than study or recruitment deserves extreme caution. The fallen angels are many things, but they're rare. Why irrational in their strategic decisions? Rias leaned forward, her determination evident. Oni-sama, we need information. Without understanding what Issei represents, we can't properly prepare for whatever comes next. The fallen angels will try again, likely with greater numbers and planning. Xenovia regarded his sister for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Issei. What do you think? These are your memories, your identity we're discussing. Are you prepared for what you might discover? The question resonated with Issei on multiple levels. Was he ready to fully embrace the ancient consciousness awakening within him? To potentially leave behind his human life and take up responsibilities that span dimensions? I need to know, he said finally. Whatever the Primordial Night was, whatever purpose the blade served, it's becoming part of me now. I can't fight effectively or make informed decisions without understanding what I'm dealing with. The Mao nodded slowly. Very well. I'll arrange limited access to the pre-war sections of the archives. But, he added with sudden sternness, you will be accompanied at all times by authorized personnel, and any information you discover is to be reported directly to me before anyone else. Are we clear? Perfectly, Rias agreed, too quickly for Issei's comfort. Xenovia seemed to notice her eagerness as well, his eyes narrowing slightly. This isn't a treasure hunt, Rias. If the fallen angels are willing to risk war over this matter, we need to proceed with extreme caution. Of course, Oni-sama. We'll be discreet. The Mao sighed, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to deny his sister outright. I'll make the arrangements. In the meantime, Hyodo Issei should be introduced to more of our society. If he's going to be associating with the Gremory household, he should understand the environment he's entering. I was planning to take him to the formal gardens this afternoon, Rias replied. Several noble houses are hosting gatherings there. An excellent idea. Xenovia rose, signaling the end of their meeting. I should have authorization for the archives by tomorrow. Until then, enjoy our hospitality, Hyodo Issei. And, he paused, his expression becoming unreadable, perhaps refrain from manifesting that blade in public. Some things are best kept private until we better understand their implications. The formal gardens of Lilith sprawled across acres of meticulously maintained landscape, each section reflecting the aesthetic preferences of a different noble house. Fountains whose waters flowed upward rather than down. Trees with crystalline leaves that chimed gently in the perpetual twilight breeze. Flowers that shifted colors as visitors passed, responding to emotional states rather than physical proximity. And devils. Hundreds of devils from various houses, dressed in finery that ranged from traditional aristocratic garb to cutting-edge fashion that seemed pulled from futures yet to happen in the human world. Remember, Rias murmured as they entered the main promenade, Devil Society operates on clearly defined hierarchies. Every interaction is governed by rank, bloodline, and personal power. Issei nodded, adjusting the formal attire Rias had provided for him, a tailored suit in deep blue with subtle silver accents that apparently marked him as being under Gremory protection without claiming him as an official servant. How should I introduce myself? He asked. As my honored guest, she replied. Nothing more specific unless directly questioned. If anyone presses for details, defer to me. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Conversations paused as they passed, heads turning to follow their progress. Issei could sense the curiosity and speculation. Rippling through the crowd, a high-class devil heiress appearing with an unknown human companion was evidently unusual enough to merit attention. Rias Gremory, a melodious voice called out. What an unexpected pleasure. A strikingly beautiful woman with silver hair approached, her movement so graceful she appeared to glide across the manicured lawn. Her dress, a flowing creation of midnight blue fabric that seemed to contain actual stars, complemented a figure that would have reduced the old Issei to stammering incoherence. Lady Citri, Rias replied with practiced formality. You honor us with your attention. Such protocol, the woman laughed. Are we not beyond such formalities, childhood friend? Rias smiled, her posture relaxing slightly. Forgive me, Seraphal, official settings always bring out my training. And who is your intriguing companion? Seraphal Citri inquired, turning her attention to Issei with undisguised interest. Hyodo Issei, an honored guest of the Gremory household, Rias introduced. Issei-kun, this is Lady Seraphal Citri, head of the Citri clan and current holder of the Mao title Leviathan. Another Mao. Issei bowed respectfully, sensing immense power contained within Seraphal's deceptively playful demeanor. A pleasure to meet you, Leviathan Sama. Oh my, so formal. Seraphal exclaimed with a girlish giggle that seemed at odds with her status. Any friend of Rias-chan is a friend of mine. Though I must say, you're causing quite the stir, appearing so suddenly in our little society. Her eyes, Issei noticed, didn't match her frivolous tone. They were sharp and assessing, missing nothing. I hope not to cause any inconvenience, he replied carefully. Inconvenience? Not at all. We so rarely get interesting visitors these days. She leaned closer, her voice dropping conspiratorially. Though perhaps next time, Rias-chan might give her fellow Mao some advance notice before bringing a human with such unique energy signatures into our realm, yes. Rias had the grace to look slightly abashed. My apologies, Seraphal. Events have developed rather quickly. They always do around you, dear. Seraphal patted Rias' arm affectionately before turning back to Issei. Enjoy your stay in our realm, Hyodo Issei. I suspect it will be educational for us all. With that cryptic comment, she drifted away to join another group of nobles. Leaving Issei with the distinct impression he'd just been evaluated by someone far more dangerous than her bubbly exterior suggested. Is she always like that? He asked once Seraphal was out of earshot. Seraphal cultivates her eccentric persona carefully, Rias explained. It leads people to underestimate her, which is generally their last mistake. She's one of the most powerful and politically savvy devils in the underworld. And she just identified something unusual about my energy signature. Yes, which means we should expect others to notice as well. Rias eyed the garden gathering with calculating eyes. We should circulate. Brief interactions with multiple groups will satisfy curiosity without allowing for too many probing questions. The next hour passed in a whirl of introductions and carefully modulated conversations. Issei met representatives from numerous devil houses, each interaction a delicate dance of etiquette and implied power dynamics. He noted how Rias subtly adjusted her manner depending on the status of whomever they were addressing. More formal with higher-ranking nobles, more relaxed but still maintaining distance with those of lower status. Throughout it all, he felt the weight of curious stares and whispered speculations. His presence was clearly unusual, but Rias's status as a Gremorian sister to a Mao prevented anyone from questioning too directly. You're handling this well, she commented during a brief respite between conversations. Most humans find devil society overwhelming at first. It's not so different from human politics, Issei observed, just more overt about the power dynamics. A commotion near the garden's eastern entrance interrupted their conversation. A group of young devils had arrived, led by a handsome blonde man whose arrogant bearing suggested significant status. Riser Phoenix, Rias murmured, her expression cooling noticeably. And his entourage. I take it you're not fond of him, Issei noted, catching the shift in her demeanor. He's my fiancé, she replied flatly. Or at least, he believes he is. Before Issei could process this surprising information, Riser spotted them and changed course, heading directly toward their position with confident strides. My beloved Rias, he called out, his voice carrying across the garden with deliberate volume. What a delightful surprise to find you here. I was just telling my peerage how I've missed your radiant presence. The group following him, comprised entirely of attractive young women in coordinated outfits, nodded in practiced unison. Riser. Rias acknowledged with minimal warmth. I wasn't aware you were in Lilith this week. Business with the council brought me to the capital, he replied, taking her hand without permission and pressing his lips to it in a gesture that lingered inappropriately. How fortunate that it allowed me to encounter my future bride. Rias extracted her hand with barely concealed distaste. As I've told you repeatedly, that matter is far from settled. Merely a question of time and formalities, Riser dismissed with a wave, his attention shifting to Issei. And who might this be? A new servant. Your taste has always been eclectic. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. Issei felt a flicker of irritation that seemed to resonate with something deeper. The awakening consciousness of the primordial knight responding to the casual disrespect. Hyodo Issei. He introduced himself before Rias could intervene. A guest of the Gremory household. Riser raised an eyebrow. A human guest. How novel. Though I must say, Rias, when we are married, we will need to discuss these unusual associations of yours. The Phoenix family has certain standards to maintain. The presumption ignited something in Issei, a protective instinct that transcended his brief association with Rias. The air around him cooled perceptibly, frost forming on nearby goblets as his partially awakened power responded to his emotions. I believe, he said with deliberate calm, that Rias has made her position on your engagement quite clear. Conversations throughout the guard. Fell silent as attendees sensed the building tension. Riser's expression darkened, his own power flaring in response, waves of heat that countered Issei's cold, the conflicting temperatures creating visible distortions in the air between them. You presume much, human, Riser said softly, dangerously. Do you know who I am? Riser Phoenix, Issei replied evenly. Third son of the Phoenix clan. Wielder of immortal flames. And someone who apparently doesn't listen well to refusal. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. No one had expected a human guest to directly challenge a high-ranking devil. Especially not over a matter as politically charged as the Gremory Phoenix engagement. Riser's handsome features contorted with anger, flames beginning to lick along his fingers. You dare. That's enough. Rias stepped between them, her own power manifesting as crimson energy that crackled with warning. Riser, Issei-kun speaks as my guest and with my implicit permission. Any insult to him is an insult to House Gremory. The standoff held for several tense seconds, the three of them locked in a triangle of opposing energies that had the nearby devils backing away in alarm. Finally, Riser mastered his anger, the flames around his hands extinguishing as he forced a cold smile. As always, your taste in companions provides endless entertainment, my dear. We will discuss this further at a more appropriate time. He turned and stalked away, his peerage hurrying after him with concerned glances back at Rias and Issei. As the confrontation ended, whispers erupted throughout the garden, the gathered nobles digesting this unexpected development with avid interest. Well, Rias sighed, so much for maintaining a low profile. I apologize, Issei offered. I spoke without thinking. No, she countered, surprising him. You spoke exactly what needed to be said. Though perhaps not in the most politically advantageous setting. She surveyed the watching crowd with resignation. We should leave. What just happened will be circulating through every noble house by nightfall. As they made their way toward the garden exit, Issei noted how the other devils now regarded him, not merely with curiosity, but with speculation and, from some, a new wariness. He had revealed himself as something more than an ordinary human, and in the status-conscious society of devils. That made him an unknown quantity to be reassessed. Riser Phoenix, he said once they were beyond the garden boundaries. Tell me about this engagement. Rias's expression tightened. An arranged marriage, political alliance between two prominent houses, negotiated when I was too young to have any say in the matter. And you don't want it. What gave it away? She asked dryly. Just a hunch. Issei glanced at her, noting the genuine distress beneath her composed exterior. Can't you simply refuse? Devil politics are rarely that simple. She sighed, her pace slowing as they entered a less crowded avenue. The agreement includes complex magical contracts and financial arrangements. Breaking it would damage my family's position and potentially destabilize alliances that have stood for centuries. So you're trapped. Quote, I'm exploring options, she corrected. My brother understands my reluctance and has been helping me search for loopholes or alternative arrangements. Issei considered this, feeling an unexpected protectiveness toward Rias despite their relatively brief acquaintance. The ancient consciousness stirring within him seemed to resonate with her predicament, boundaries being imposed. Freedom restricted, choices denied. Perhaps, he suggested carefully, this is something our alliance could address. Once we understand more about my abilities, maybe they could help resolve your situation. Rias stopped walking, turning to study him with genuine surprise. You would use the power of the Primordial Night to help me escape an unwanted marriage. The question gave Issei pause. Would he? Should he? The awakening memories suggested the Primordial Night had existed for far greater purposes than interfering in devil politics. And yet, I believe in freedom of choice, he said finally. If your engagement truly traps you against your will, then yes, I would consider using whatever abilities I have to help. That's what allies do, isn't it? So, nothing shifted in Rias's expression, a softening around the eyes, a subtle relaxation of her perpetually guarded demeanor. Yes, she agreed quietly. I suppose it is. They resumed walking, a new understanding forming between them. No longer merely strategic allies against a common threat, but something more personal, more genuine. Issei-kun, Rias said after several moments of companionable silence. I think it's time you met the rest of my family. The Gremory estate sprawled across an expanse of land that would have encompassed a small city in the human world. Classical European architecture blended with impossible structures that defied conventional physics. Towers that twisted like DNA helices, bridges that connected buildings across dimensions rather than physical space, dens where plants from a dozen different realms coexisted in carefully maintained ecosystems. This has been our family seat for over 2,000 years, Rias explained as they approached the main residence. Though it's been expanded and renovated countless times as architectural fashions changed. It's beautiful, Issei said honestly, admiring the craftsmanship evident in every detail. Contingent of servants greeted them at the entrance, devils of various ranks who bowed respectfully to Rias and regarded Issei with professional neutrality that couldn't quite mask their curiosity. Lady Rias, the most senior-looking attendant announced, your parents await you in the Eastern Salon. They've been informed of your guest. Thank you, Caldwell. Rias nodded dismissively, then led Issei through a labyrinth of corridors whose grandeur would have put the most opulent human palaces to shame. Your parents know about me? Issei asked as they walked. My brother would have informed them after our meeting, she confirmed. The Gremory family maintains closer communication than most noble houses. It's part of our strength. The Eastern Salon proved to be a surprisingly intimate space given the mansion's overall scale. A comfortable room with plush seating arranged around a central hearth where blue-green flames danced in complex patterns. Two figures rose as Rias and Issei entered. Their resemblance to Rias immediately apparent. Daughter, the man greeted warmly, embracing Rias with genuine affection. Welcome home. Father, she returned, her formal demeanor softening noticeably. Mother, thank you for receiving us on such short notice. As if we would do otherwise, her mother replied with a smile. Her eyes, identical to Rias's in shape and color, already assessing Issei with keen interest. Allow me to introduce Hyodo Issei, Rias said, turning to include him in the family circle. My ally and honored guest. The young man Xenovia mentioned, Lord Gremory nodded, extending his hand in the human fashion just as his son had done. Welcome to our home, Hyodo Issei. I am Xenovia Gremory, and this is my wife, Venilana. Issei shook the offered hand, noting the controlled strength behind the grip. Thank you for your hospitality, Lord Gremory. Please, sit, Venilana invited, gesturing to the comfortable seating. Refreshments will arrive shortly. As they settled into the conversation area, Issei found himself the focus of two penetrating gazes that missed nothing. Rias's parents might present a warmer exterior than most devil nobility, their assessment was no less thorough for its gentleness. Our son has shared some interesting information about you, Xenovia began once servants had delivered an array of refreshments and withdrawn. Though I suspect he was deliberately vague on certain details. Xenovia has always had a flair for the dramatic, Venilana added with fond exasperation. He mentioned ancient powers awakening and fallen angel assassins. But little concrete explanation. Rias glanced at Issei, silently asking how much he wished to reveal. He considered briefly, then decided that half measures would only complicate matters further. I appear to be the reincarnation, or perhaps the vessel, of an entity known as the Primordial Night, he explained directly. A being that predates the current supernatural order and wielded a weapon called the Blade of Infinity. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Xenovia and Venelana exchanged a glance loaded with unspoken communication. The Primordial Night, Venelana repeated carefully, as if testing the words. That's a name I haven't heard in a very long time. You recognize it? Rias asked, leaning forward with sudden intensity. Her mother nodded slowly. There are stories, very old stories, passed down through the oldest devil bloodlines. Tales from before the Great War, before the biblical God established his system. Myths, most scholars would say. Xenovia added, though his expression suggested he thought otherwise. Not myths, Issei said with quiet certainty. Though perhaps distorted by time and telling. Venelana studied him with renewed interest. You remember. Fragments, images, knowledge that surfaces when needed. But not the complete picture. We're planning to visit the ancestral archives tomorrow, Rias explained. Xenovia is arranging access to the pre-war sections. Her father frowned slightly. That may be problematic. Those archives contain knowledge that was deliberately sealed away after the war. Information deemed too dangerous for any single faction to control. So Xenovia mentioned, Rias acknowledged. But we need to understand what Issei represents and why. The fallen angels are so determined to eliminate him. And perhaps, Issei added quietly, why I'm awakening now, after so many millennia. Venelana set down her teacup with deliberate care. There is another option. One that might provide some answers without the political complications of accessing the restricted archives. Mother, Rias prompted when Venelana hesitated. The Gremory family maintains its own private records. She explained. Chronicles that predate the formation of the current Mao system. They're not as comprehensive as the ancestral archives, but they might contain information about the primordial era. Quote, Xenovia looked at his wife in surprise. You're suggesting the Memoria Sanguinis. That's restricted to direct bloodline members. Exceptions have been made before. For matters of sufficient importance. Venelana's gaze returned to Issei, assessing and calculating. If the Primordial Night is truly awakening in our time, that certainly qualifies. What is the Memoria Sanguinis? Issei asked. Blood memory, Rias translated. A collection of experiences and knowledge passed down through our family line, preserved through specialized magic. It's part history, part ancestral wisdom, the accumulated experiences of generations of Gremories. And it might contain information about the primordial era. Issei asked, hope kindling within him. Possibly, Venelana confirmed. The Gremory line is among the oldest devil bloodlines. Our ancestors witnessed the formation of the current supernatural order and preserved some knowledge of what came before. Xenovia looked troubled. Accessing the Memoria requires a blood ritual. For a non-Gremory to participate would be unprecedented. These are unprecedented times, husband, Venelana countered gently. If the fallen angels are mobilizing against this young man, we need to understand why. Especially if our daughter has allied herself with him. The lord of the house considered this, his expression thoughtful. It would need to be done carefully. The Memoria responds unpredictably to non-family members. I'm willing to take that risk, Issei said immediately. Rias placed a restraining hand on his arm. It's not that simple. The Memoria Sanguinis isn't just information. It's experiences, emotions, memories. Connecting to it could overwhelm an unprepared mind. My mind is already accommodating memories from a primordial entity, Issei pointed out. I think I can handle your family history. Confident, Xenovia observed with a hint of amusement. I'm beginning to see why Rias finds you interesting. A faint blush colored Rias's cheeks, but she maintained her composure. If we attempt this, we should prepare thoroughly. The ritual requires specific conditions and safeguards. I'll make the arrangements, Venelana decided, rising gracefully. We can proceed tonight, after you've had time to rest and center yourselves. Tonight, Rias looked surprised. So quickly. If the fallen angels have already made one attempt on your Ali's life, they will certainly make another, her mother pointed out pragmatically. Better to seek answers while we can. With that settled, the conversation shifted to lighter topics as Venelana and Xeodicus made an effort to know Issei beyond his supernatural significance. They asked about his life in the human world, his family, his experiences at Kuo Academy. The normality of the discussion was almost surreal given the cosmic implications of his awakening identity, but Issei found himself grateful for the reminder that he was still, at least partially, a human teenager. Later, as a servant led him to a guest suite to rest before the evening's ritual, Issei reflected on the unexpected warmth of the Gremory family. Despite their power and status, they demonstrated genuine care for each other and surprising openness to an outsider. It contrasted sharply with the rigid formality he'd observed among other devil nobles. The guest suite proved to be larger than his entire house in the human world, decorated in tasteful blues and silvers that somehow felt selected specifically for him despite the impossibility of such preparation. A balcony offered another view of the underworld's perpetual twilight landscape, the strange beauty of it still catching him by surprise. Issei stepped out onto the balcony, breathing deeply of air that tasted faintly of spices and something indefinable, something that registered to his awakening senses as pure energy rather than physical matter. Who are you? He murmured to himself, or perhaps to the ancient consciousness stirring within him. And what am I becoming? The questions hung unanswered in the twilight air. But perhaps, after tonight's ritual, he would finally begin to understand. The chamber deep beneath the Gremory estate pulsed with old magic, power that registered to Issei's enhanced perception as fundamentally different from the devil energy he'd encountered thus far. This was something primal, organic, rooted in blood and bone rather than mathematical constructs and geometric precision. Rias stood beside him at the entrance, her expression unusually solemn. The Memoria Sanguinis is our most closely guarded treasure, she explained quietly. What you're about to experience has been shared with fewer than a dozen non-Gremories in our entire history. I understand the honor, Issei assured her, and the responsibility. The chamber itself was circular, its walls inlaid with veins of what appeared to be actual crystallized blood that pulsed with slow, rhythmic light, like a massive heartbeat. At the center, a depression in the floor contained a pool of liquid too thick and dark to be water, its surface perfectly still despite the slight movement of air in the room. Venelana and Xeodicus waited beside the pool, dressed now in formal robes embroidered with the Gremory crest. They had discarded the casual warmth of their earlier meeting, assuming the gravitas of their positions as lord and lady of an ancient devil house. Approach, Venelana instructed, her voice carrying ritual weight. Issei and Rias moved forward until they stood at the edge of the dark pool. Up close, Issei could see that the liquid wasn't merely dark, it contained swirling patterns of crimson and gold, like galaxies in perpetual motion beneath its placid surface. The Memoria Sanguinis contains the distilled experiences of every Gremory who has chosen to contribute to it, Xeodicus explained. Not merely memories, but emotions, insights, wisdom. It is our collective consciousness preserved across generations. For a non-Gremory to access it requires a blood bond with a family member, Venelana continued. Rias has volunteered to serve as your anchor. Issei glanced at Rias, who nodded confirmation. The connection will allow you to experience the Memoria through my bloodline connection, while I help filter and interpret what you encounter. Are you ready to proceed? Xeodicus asked formally. I am, Issei confirmed, though uncertainty fluttered in his stomach. The pool's swirling depths seemed to watch him with collective intelligence, assessing his worthiness. Then we begin. Venelana produced a ceremonial dagger of silver and crystal, its edge gleaming in the pulsing light of the chamber. Your hands, please. Issei and Rias extended their right hands. With precise movements, Venelana drew the blade across each of their palms, quick, shallow cuts that nonetheless produced streams of blood. Blood to blood, Xeodicus intoned. Mind to mind, memory to memory. The Gremory line accepts this seeker of knowledge and binds him to our daughter as anchor and guide. Let what is known become shared, Venelana continued the ritual. Let what is remembered be revealed. Let the Memoria Sanguinis open to this worthy query. Issei felt a strange resonance building as the ritual words echoed in the chamber. The ancient consciousness within him stirred, recognizing power patterns that predated modern magical systems. Join your hands, Xeodicus instructed, and then immerse them in the pool. Rias's fingers interlaced with Issei's, their blood mingling as their palms pressed together. Her skin felt surprisingly warm against his, her grip firm and reassuring. "Ready," she murmured, her eyes meeting his. Issei nodded, and together they knelt at the pool's edge, lowering their joined hands into the mysterious liquid. The moment their blood made contact with the memoria, reality shattered. Issei's consciousness exploded outward, fragmenting into thousands, millions, of separate awareness points. He was simultaneously a young devil child learning to manifest power for the first time, an ancient Gremory pater. Arch negotiating the original devil territories, a terrified witness to the Great War's devastation, a scholar discovering fundamental principles of magical theory, a lover experiencing passion across centuries of different partners. A grieving parent burying a child lost to conflict. Lifetimes cascaded through him in chaotic flood, threatening to drown his identity beneath the collective weight of Gremory experience. Then he felt Rias's presence, a steady anchor point amid the chaos, her consciousness guiding his through the overwhelming deluge of memories and emotions. "Focus," her thoughts whispered across the bond. "Seek specific knowledge." The primordial night, the time before, Issei concentrated, using techniques that came instinctively from his awakening abilities. The chaotic flood of memories began to organize, irrelevant experiences receding as specific knowledge rose to prominence. He found himself, or rather, the consciousness of a long-dead Gremory ancestor, standing on a battlefield unlike any in recorded history. The sky above split with fractures that revealed the howling void beyond reality itself. Armies clashed with weapons that distorted the fabric of existence, commanded by beings whose true forms could only be partially perceived by mortal senses. And there, at the center of the conflict, a singular figure wielding a blade that shone with the light of infinite possibilities. The primordial night, moving through reality as if it were merely suggestion rather than law, the blade of infinity cleaving through both physical enemies and the conceptual threats they represented. The ancestors' memories carried terror and awe in equal measure, watching as the night single-handedly drove back an invasion of entities that sought not conquest but annihilation, the unmaking of reality itself. The scene shifted, moving forward in time. The same ancestor, now older, recording knowledge in a chamber very similar to the one Issei's physical body still occupied. The writing spoke of the aftermath, how the primordial night had sacrificed something fundamental to seal the boundaries between dimensions, fragmenting the blade of infinity and scattering its pieces across multiple realities to serve as anchors for the new order. And a warning, written in blood ink that seemed to glow with urgency even across the millennia: should the night return, it heralds either salvation or destruction. For the awakening comes only when the void once again seeks entrance to our reality. The memory shifted again, moving to more recent times, recent in cosmic terms. Though still thousands of years in the past, the biblical God establishing his system, creating angels and the fundamental laws of the new supernatural order. The rebellion and fall of those who became the fallen angels. The rise of devil society as a counterbalance. And through it all, deliberate suppression of knowledge about what came before. An agreement between the leaders of all three factions to seal away information about the primordial era, fearing that such power, if rediscovered, could shatter the tenuous balance they had established. The fallen angels, Issei realized with sudden clarity, weren't trying to kill him out of fear or hatred. They were fulfilling an ancient compact, a promise to prevent the return of powers that predated their existence and threatened the very foundations of the current supernatural order. With that realization, the Memoria Sanguinis suddenly reacted, not to Issei's human consciousness, but to the awakening presence of the primordial night within him. The dark liquid began to churn and spiral, its formerly placid surface erupting in violent reaction. "Pull them out." Xeodicus's voice cut through the mental connection, distant but urgent. "Something's wrong." Issei felt hands grasping his shoulders, trying to drag him away from the pool. But the Memoria had locked onto the primordial energy signature now, responding to something it recognized from its oldest contributions. The chamber began to shake, dust falling from the ancient ceiling as the crystallized blood veins in the walls pulsed with increasingly erratic rhythm. "Issei." Rias's voice penetrated the chaos, both physically and across their mental bond. "Let go. You need to release the connection." He tried, but the Memoria held him fast, drawing not on his blue D now but on the awakening power of the primordial night. Images flashed through his mind with increasing speed and intensity, civilizations rising and falling, dimensions collapsing, the void pressing. G against reality's boundaries with relentless patience. And something else, a presence that registered across the mental connection with chilling familiarity. Something vast and ancient had noticed T. He stirring of primordial energies and turned its attention toward the underworld. With sudden, terrible clarity, Issei understood the danger. The ritual had created a beacon, a flare of energy that pierced dimensional boundaries and signaled his location to precisely the forces the primordial night had once fought to contain. "We need to end this now," he shouted, his voice strange even to his own ears, layered with harmonics that didn't belong to a human throat. The blade of infinity materialized in his free hand without conscious summoning, responding to the imminent threat. With one precise movement, Issei severed the connection between himself and the Memoria Sanguinis, the edge of the blade passing through the dark liquid without resistance. Reality snapped back into conventional focus. Issei found himself on his knees beside the now turbulent pool, Rias beside him with her face pale from the abrupt disconnection. Venelana and Xenovia stood a few paces back, their expressions shocked as they stared at the fully manifested blade in Issei's grip. "We need to move," Issei said urgently, pulling Rias to her feet. "Now. They've found us." "Who's found us?" Xenovia demanded. Before Issei could answer, the chamber's far wall exploded inward, stone and mortar disintegrating under an impact of impossible force. Through the newly created opening stepped three figures that defied conventional description, humanoid in general outline but wrong in every detail, their forms shifting and twisting as if unable to maintain stability in the current dimension. Void Collective, Issei identified. The knowledge surfacing from his awakening memories. Agents of Unmaking. The central figure, taller than the others, with a face that seemed composed of constantly shifting geometric patterns, focused on Issei with features that momentarily coalesced into a semblance of recognition. "Night," it said, its voice a discordant chord that made the chamber's occupants flinch in pain. "Fragment. Incomplete. But sufficient for our purpose. Get behind me," Issei ordered the Gremories, stepping forward with the blade of infinity raised. The sword had fully solidified now, responding to the immediate threat with eager luminescence that cast sharp-edged shadows across the chamber. The void agents advanced with movements that violated natural physics, seemingly teleporting RT distances rather than walking conventionally. Their limbs elongated and contracted, fingers extending into talons that left trails of absolute darkness in the air, not shadow, but the absence of existence itself. "We cannot permit reconstitution," the leader stated in that same reality-grating voice. "The compact must be maintained. Boundaries must erode according to schedule." Issei felt the ancient consciousness surge forward within him, combat knowledge and dimensional awareness flooding his system. When he spoke again, it was with the full authority of the primordial night. "You trespass where you are not welcome. Void spawn. Return to your non-space or be returned in pieces." The void agents paused, their shifting forms registering something like surprise. More integrated than anticipated. Adaptation required. They attacked simultaneously, moving with speed that would have been impossible to track with ordinary human perception. But Issei was no longer perceiving as merely human. The blade of infinity swept through the air in precise arcs, not merely parrying physical attacks but cutting through the dimensional distortions the void agents generated. Where the blade passed, reality firmed and stabilized, forcing the intruders into more conventional physicality. "Impressive," Venelana murmured, watching as Issei moved with impossible grace, the sword in his hand, leaving trails of golden light that seemed to reinforce the fabric of existence itself. But the void agents adapted quickly, their attacks becoming more coordinated, more targeted. One managed to flank Issei, its elongated arms sweeping toward Rias with talons that would erase rather than merely wound. Xenovia reacted with paternal fury, unleashing a torrent of Gremory power that intercepted the attack. The devil magic, potent as it was, merely slowed rather than stopped the void agent's advance. "Conventional energy is ineffective," Issei called out, parrying another attack from the leader. "They exist partially outside our dimensional laws. Then what can harm them?" Rias demanded, her own power gathering around her hands despite its apparent ineffectiveness. In answer, Issei executed a complex maneuver that momentarily created an opening in his defense. The leader of the Void Agents lunged forward, anticipating vulnerability, only to impale itself on the waiting blade of infinity. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The agent's form destabilized completely, its constantly shifting features freezing in an expression of what might have been shock before it collapsed inward, imploding into a singularity that vanished with a sound like reality itself sighing in relief. The remaining two agents retreated several steps, their movements now more cautious. Partial night, partial blade, but sufficient threat, one communicated to the other in that discordant language. Strategic withdrawal advised. Agreed. Further reinforcement required. Before Issei could press his advantage, the two remaining Void Agents seemed to fold inward, their forms collapsing through dimensions invisible to conventional perception until they vanished entirely, leaving only faint distortions in the air that gradually normalized. The immediate danger past, Issei lowered the blade of infinity, its edge dimming as the threat receded. He turned to find the three Gremorys staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to awe. What? Xenovia asked carefully. Were those things agents of the Void Collective? Issei explained, the knowledge flowing more freely now after the combat-triggered awakening. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, seeking to unravel reality back to primordial chaos. And they recognized you, Rias noted. Called you Night. Yes, the Primordial Night was their ancient enemy, the guardian who prevented them from unmaking existence. Issei looked down at the blade, which had begun to lose cohesion again as the immediate danger passed. The ritual must have created an energy signature they could track across dimensions. Will they return? Venelana asked practically. Eventually. But not immediately. They'll need to gather more agents. Prepare more thoroughly now that they know the blade can still harm them. Xenovia surveyed the destroyed chamber with a grimace. We need to inform Xenovia. If these Void Agents can breach the underworld's dimensional barriers, we face a threat beyond conventional understanding. Agreed, Issei said, allowing the blade to dissolve completely as fatigue began to set in. The combat had accelerated his awakening, but his human body still struggled to channel the primordial energies for extended periods. But first, we need to understand what we learned from the Memoria. You saw something specific, Rias said, not a question but a statement. Something about why the fallen angels want you dead. Issei nodded grimly. They're honoring an ancient compact, an agreement between the three factions to prevent the return of primordial powers that might threaten their established order. But why? Venelana pressed. If these Void Agents are the greater threat, rely the primordial powers that once contained them would be welcomed, not suppressed. That's the question, Issei agreed. And I think we need to find someone who might have answers outside the official histories. Who? Xenovia asked. Issei met Rias's gaze, his expression resolute. We need to speak with someone who predates the current system but isn't bound by its political constraints. Someone who would remember the primordial era firsthand. Understanding dawned in Rias's eyes. You're thinking of Tiamat, the Chaos Karma Dragon, one of the few beings still active who might have witnessed the original conflict. Issei confirmed, and who wouldn't be bound by the compact between angels, devils, and fallen. Tiamat hasn't granted an audience to anyone, devil, angel, or human, in over a millennium. Xenovia pointed out, she's deliberately removed herself from supernatural politics. She might make an exception, Issei said quietly, for the Primordial Night. The weight of the title hung in the air, a reminder of the identity still awakening within him, and the responsibilities that came with it. Whatever he had been before becoming Hyodo Issei, whatever cosmic role the Primordial Night had played, it was inextricably part of him now. The attack by the Void Agents had proven that ignoring his awakening nature wasn't an option. The boundaries between dimensions were weakening, the ancient enemies returning, and whether the current supernatural factions approved or not, the Primordial Night, and the Blade of Infinity, would be needed once more. We should leave immediately, Rias decided, her practical nature asserting itself. Before word of what happened here spreads too widely, I'll arrange transportation to the human world, Venelana offered, and speak with Xenovia about increasing dimensional security around our territories. As the Gremories mobilized with impressive efficiency, Issei took a moment to center himself, feeling the change. The combat had wrought in his awakening consciousness. The Primordial Knight was more integrated now, less a separate entity and more an extension of his own identity. The memories remained fragmented, but the purpose had crystallized with undeniable clarity. The void sought entrance. The boundaries weakened, and he, Hyodo Issei, ordinary high school student and reincarnation of something far older, stood as the first and perhaps only line of defense against forces that would unmake reality itself. It was a burden no 17-year-old should have to bear. Yet as he followed Rias from the chamber, Issei felt a strange sense of rightness in accepting it. This was what he had been born for, or perhaps, reborn for. The reason his ordinary life had suddenly become extraordinary. He only hoped he would be equal to the task that destiny had thrust upon him. The return to the human world occurred with considerably less ceremony than their departure to the underworld. No formal transportation circles or elaborate preparations, merely a hastily established dimensional gate in a secure room of the Gremory estate, powered by Venelana's considerable magical abilities. "Be careful, he cautioned as they prepared to step through. "What happened here will have repercussions across all three factions once word spreads. The compact to suppress primordial knowledge has stood for millennia. Its violation won't be taken lightly. We'll be discreet," Rias promised, embracing her mother briefly. "Discretion may no longer be an option," Xeodicus noted grimly. "The Void agents have already identified Issei. Others will follow." The lord of the house turned to Issei, his expression solemn. "Young man, I don't envy the burden you carry. But know that House Gremory stands with you, whatever comes next." "Thank you," Issei replied, touched by the unexpected support. "I'll do my best to justify your trust." With final farewells exchanged, Rias and Issei stepped through the dimensional gate, experiencing the now familiar sensation of reality folding around them before reconstituting in a new location. They emerged in the Occult Research Club room at Kuo Academy, which had been hastily repaired following the fallen angel attack. The pre-dawn hours left the school grounds deserted, the silence broken only by distant birdsong announcing the approaching day. "We have PS 12 hours before the fallen angels regroup," Rias estimated, moving immediately to her desk and retrieving several ancient texts. "And less than that before my brother realizes exactly what we've learned and attempts to intervene." "You think Searzex will try to stop us?" Issei asked, surprised. "Not maliciously," she clarified. "But he's a Mao. His first responsibility is to devil society as a whole. If he believes our actions might destabilize the peace between factions, he'll feel obligated to contain the situation." Issei nodded, understanding the complex position Rias's brother occupied. "Then we need to move quickly. How do we find Tiamat?" "That's the challenge." Rias opened one of the texts, revealing pages covered in script that predated modern language systems. "Tiamat deliberately obscures her location, moving between dimensional pockets that she creates and collapses at will. But she must maintain some constant presence, some anchor point in physical reality," Issei reasoned. The knowledge coming from his awakening memories of cosmic structures. According to legend, yes, dragons of her caliber can't completely abandon the material plane without losing connection to their power sources. Rias traced a finger along an illustration that depicted a massive dragon coiled around what appeared to be a mountain range. The most persistent rumors place her somewhere in the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic energies provide constant power. "Japan sits on the Ring of Fire," Issei noted. "Could she be closer than we think?" "Possibly." Rias considered this with growing excitement. "That would explain why your awakening is happening here specifically. Proximity to a being of her age and power could serve as a catalyst for dormant primordial energies." The theory made intuitive sense to Issei, resonating with his emerging understanding of cosmic relationships. "So how do we contact her?" Rias closed the ancient text and moved to a cabinet that Issei hadn't noticed before. With a complex gesture, she dispelled several layers of magical protection and retrieved a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. "This is a dragon call," she explained, opening the box to reveal what looked like a flute carved from iridescent material. "An artifact my family has possessed for generations. It's said to resonate on frequencies that dragons find difficult to ignore." And you think it will reach Tiamat specifically? That depends on how close she actually is. Rias lifted the instrument carefully. And how interested she might be in the return of the Primordial Knight. Before their plan could proceed further, the club room door burst open. Akeno rushed in, her usually composed demeanor visibly shaken. "Bushu, you're back." Relief colored her voice before urgency reasserted itself. "We have a situation." "What's happened?" Rias demanded, setting aside the dragon call. "The church has sent representatives," Akeno reported. EY arrived an hour ago at the city limits, formally requesting a meeting with the devil administrator of Kuo territory. Exorcists. Rias frowned. "That's unusual but not unprecedented. Why the urgency?" "Not just any exorcists," Akeno clarified, her gaze shifting to include Issei. "They specifically mentioned sensing an ancient power awakening, and demand to investigate. And one of them carries Durandal." The name sent a jolt of recognition through Issei's awakening consciousness. Durandal, one of the most powerful holy swords, forged from materials that resonated with the blade of infinity, he murmured, the knowledge surfacing with sudden clarity. Durandal contains a shard of the original blade, reforged into a holy sword during the early Christian era. Both devils stared at him in shock. "That's not in any historical record I've ever encountered," Rias said carefully. "No, it wouldn't be," Issei agreed. "That knowledge was deliberately obscured as part of the compact between factions. But the Primordial Knight would remember the fragmentation of the original blade. If Durandal contains a fragment of your weapon," Akeno reasoned, "then its wielder might be drawn to you as the fragments seek to reunite." "Exactly." Issei felt a growing certainty, another piece of the cosmic puzzle clicking into place. "Who carries Durandal now?" "A young exorcist named Xenovia Quarta," Akeno answered. "She's accompanied by another wielder of a holy sword, Irina Shido with Excalibur Mimic." The second name triggered no special recognition from Issei's awakening memories. But the first resonated with unexpected significance. Xenovia Quarta. The name felt important, though he couldn't yet understand why. "We need to meet with them," he decided. "If Durandal contains a fragment of the Blade of Infinity, its wielder might have insights or abilities relevant to what we're facing." "Meeting with church representatives carries political risks," Rias cautioned. "Especially after what just happened in the underworld." "We don't have the luxury of political caution anymore," Issei countered. "The Void agents have found me. They'll return in greater numbers. We need allies wherever we can find them, regardless of faction boundaries." Rias studied him for a long moment, noting the increased confidence in his bearing, the authority that seemed to have so solidified during their underworld journey. This was not merely Hyodo Issei speaking now, but the awakening Primordial Knight, a being that had once transcended the very factions they now navigated. "Very well," she decided. "Akeno, arrange a formal meeting at neutral ground. The old shrine at the city's edge should suffice. It's been abandoned long enough to hold no particular allegiance." "I'll inform Kiba and Kaneko as well," Akeno added. "Given recent events, we should have the full peerage present." As Akeno departed to make arrangements, Rias turned back to Issei with a troubled expression. "Events are accelerating faster than I anticipated. The fallen angels, void agents, and now the church, all converging because of your awakening." "It's not coincidence," Issei said quietly. "The Primordial Knight doesn't awaken without cause. Something fundamental is changing in the cosmic balance. All factions can sense it, even if they don't fully understand what they're sensing. And the Void Collective is behind it. They're symptoms, not the cause." Issei frowned, trying to articulate knowledge that remained frustratingly fragmented. The boundaries between dimensions naturally erode over time. The Primordial Knight's purpose was to maintain those boundaries, prevent incursions from the void. With the night gone and the blade scattered, that maintenance stopped. So the boundaries have been weakening for how long? Millennia. But erosion accelerates exponentially. What began as imperceptible decay has reached critical thresholds. Issei looked down at his hand, flexing fingers that had held the blade of infinity with increasing solidity. "That's why I'm awakening now. Reality itself recognizes the danger and is attempting to reconstitute its defender." The implications settled over them with ominous weight. This wasn't merely supernatural politics or factional conflicts, this was existential threat on a cosmic scale. We should prepare for the meeting, Rias said finally. Practical concerns reasserting themselves. Church representatives, especially holy sword wielders, won't be easily convinced to ally with devils and whatever you're becoming. Then we'll have to be persuasive, Issei replied, because if the void fully breaches dimensional boundaries, factions won't matter anymore. Nothing will. The abandoned shrine stood on a wooded hillside overlooking Kuo. Its once vibrant colors faded by decades of neglect. Stone torii gates marked the boundary between mundane territory and sacred ground, though the latter designation had weakened with disuse. Rias's peerage had arrived early to secure the location, establishing subtle boundary fields that would alert them to any approach. Heba positioned himself near the main gate, his handsome features set in uncharacteristic tension. As a sword user himself, he would be the first to engage if the church representatives proved hostile. Kaneko perched on the shrine's roof, her enhanced senses monitoring the surrounding forest for any sign of ambush or unexpected visitors. Akeno stood beside Rias on the shrine's weather-worn steps, her usual playful demeanor replaced by the serious focus of a queen protecting her king. Issei waited just behind them, feeling the strange doubling of his consciousness that had intensified since the underworld journey. Part of him, the ordinary high school student, felt nervous about confronting trained church warriors. Another part, the awakening primordial knight, felt only calm assessment of tactical possibilities and diplomatic approaches. "They're coming," Kaneko announced from above, her voice carrying easily in the morning stillness. Moments later, two figures emerged from the forest path below the shrine. Young women, both appearing close to Issei's age, dressed in the distinctive battle attire of church exorcists, form-fitting bodysuits covered by white cloaks emblazoned with cross insignia. The one on the left had chestnut hair tied in twin ponytails. Her expression open and curious despite the formal circumstances. She carried what appeared to be an ordinary sword sheathed at her hip, though Issei's enhanced perceptio detected the complex energy signature of a holy weapon, Excalibur mimic, presumably. But it was the second exorcist who commanded his attention. Tall, with short blue hair framing striking features, she moved with predatory grace that spoke of extensive combat training. The massive sword strapped to her back radiated holy energy so intense it should have been painful for devils to approach, yet Issei found himself drawn to it. Recognizing something beneath the consecrated power, something ancient and familiar. "Durandal," he murmured, the blade of infinity stirring within him in recognition of its fragmented kin. The blue-haired exorcist, Xenovia Quarta, stopped abruptly, her hand moving unconsciously to her sword's hilt as her gaze locked onto Issei with sudden intensity. "You," she said, her voice carrying easily across the shrine grounds. Not a question, but a recognition. Rias stepped forward, assuming her role as territorial administrator. "I am Rias Gremory, Devil Authority in Kuo. You requested this meeting. State your purpose." The chestnut-haired exorcist bowed formally. "Irina Shido, representing the Holy Church's Executioner Division. This is my partner, Xenovia Quarta. We come under diplomatic protocol to investigate an energy signature that violates established boundaries between factions." "You're not what we expected to find," Xenovia added bluntly, her gaze still fixed on Issei. "The reports mentioned unusual power manifestations, but not you. What exactly were you expecting?" Rias asked carefully. "A fragment of the true cross, perhaps. Or an unauthorized angelic intervention." Irina glanced at her partner with slight concern. "Not whatever he is. Step forward," Xenovia commanded, addressing Issei directly and ignoring protocol. Rias moved to intervene, but Issei placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's all right," he assured her, then walked past the devil contingent to stand before the blue-haired exorcist. Up close, Xenovia's presence was even more striking. Intense golden eyes that seemed to peer directly into his essence, a face that combined European and Japanese features into distinct beauty, and an aura of absolute conviction that radiated from her like physical heat. Without warning, she drew Durandal in a single fluid motion. The massive holy sword should have been too large for her frame to wield effectively. Yet she handled it with practiced ease, bringing its gleaming edge to rest mere inches from Issei's throat. The devil peerage tensed, power gathering as they prepared to defend their ally. Irina also looked alarmed, clearly not having anticipated such an aggressive move. Xenovia, we're here under diplomatic. Be silent. Xenovia cut off her partner without looking away from Issei. This is between me and him. Issei remained perfectly still, meeting her fierce gaze without flinching. The blade of infinity stirred within him, responding to Durandal's proximity, but he kept it contained. This was not the moment for escalation. Durandal speaks to you, he said quietly, understanding flowering from his awakening memories. It has since you first wielded it. Telling you things that make no sense to church doctrine. Showing you visions of conflicts beyond human comprehension. Xenovia's eyes widened fractionally, the only indication that his words had struck home. Who are you? She demanded, Durandal's edge unwavering. I am the Primordial Knight, Issei answered, the title feeling more natural each time he claimed it. Or at least, I'm becoming him again. And that sword you wield contains a fragment of my original weapon, the Blade of Infinity, forged before angels and devils existed. For several tense heartbeats, no one moved. Then, with deliberate slowness, Xenovia lowered Durandal. Though she didn't sheath it. Durandal recognizes you, she confirmed, her voice betraying subtle wonder beneath its martial discipline. It has been restless for weeks now. Owing more so as we approached this town. Because the fragments seek reunification, Issei explained. The Blade of Infinity was deliberately scattered across dimensions at the end of the Primordial era. Durandal was forged around one of those fragments, channeling its power through consecrated steel. Irina stepped forward, her expression a mixture of confusion and theological concern. This contradicts established church history. Durandal was blessed by Saint Michael himself, its power derived from divine grace. Both can be true, Issei suggested. The fragment provided the foundational power, while angelic blessing shaped how that power manifests in your current era. Why should we believe any of this? Xenovia challenged, though her tone had lost some of its hostile edge. You stand with devils, claiming to be some pre-biblical entity our superiors have never mentioned. Your superiors have mentioned it, Issei countered. Just not to you. The highest echelons of the church, along with the leadership of devils and fallen angels, have maintained a compact for millennia to suppress knowledge of the primordial era. They fear the return of powers that predate their established order. The claim was bold, potentially inflammatory, but Issei delivered it with calm certainty born of the memories he'd accessed in the underworld. That's heretical, Irina protested, though uncertainty flickered across her features. Is it? Rias interjected, stepping forward to join the conversation. Or is it simply history that doesn't conform to convenient theological narratives? All factions have their secrets. Exorcist. Areas of knowledge restricted even from their own adherents. Xenovia's gaze shifted between Issei and Durandal, conflict evident in her expression. The sword has been communicating differently lately, showing me things that don't align with my training. I reported it to my superiors and was told to ignore these aberrations. They're not aberrations, Issei said gently. They're memories. Durandal remembers what it once was, part of something greater. To demonstrate, he extended his right hand, not fully manifesting the Blade of Infinity, but allowing its energy to coalesce around his palm, a shimmer of potential that resonated visibly with Durandal. The holy sword trembled in Xenovia's grip, its edge glowing with intensified light. Had mirrored the energy around Issei's hand. See, he said softly, it recognizes its kin. Xenovia stared at the resonance between her sword and Issei's manifested energy, her disciplined facade cracking to reveal genuine wonder. This is impossible, and yet you're witnessing it, Rias noted pragmatically. Which raises an important question. What will you do with this knowledge? The blue-haired exorcist finally sheathed Durandal, though the action seemed to require conscious effort, as if the sword resisted being separated from Issei's presence. Our mission was to investigate and report, she stated, regaining some of her professional composure. But this complicates matters. Xenovia, Irina said cautiously, we should contact headquarters for guidance. No. The deck. Issei seemed to surprise Xenovia herself as much as her partner. Not yet. If what he says is true about a compact to suppress this knowledge, reporting directly might simply bury it further. You believe me, then? Issei asked. Xenovia met his gaze steadily. Durandal believes you. That's enough to merit further investigation before I report anything. Rias stepped forward, diplomatic instincts engaging. Perhaps we can help each other. We face a common threat that transcends factional boundaries, entities called the Void Collective that seek to unmake reality itself. We've encountered them, Xenovia confirmed, surprising everyone present. 3 days ago, near Rome. Beings that violated natural laws, that our holy weapons could barely affect. The Church classified the encounter at the highest levels. Because conventional weapons and powers can't effectively combat them, Issei explained. They exist partially outside our dimensional laws. Only primordial energies, like those contained in Durandal's core and in the Blade of Infinity, can truly harm them. Understanding dawned in Xenovia's eyes. That's why we were sent here. Not just because of unusual energy readings, but because Durandal was one of the few weapons effective against these entities. Exactly. The Church leadership may not fully understand why, but they recognize the connection. Irina looked increasingly troubled. This is beyond our authority to decide. We need to consult our superiors. Your superiors will order you to eliminate me, Issei said bluntly. Just as the fallen angels tried to do. The compact between factions prioritizes maintaining the current supernatural order over addressing the true threat. Which is, Xenovia prompted, dimensional collapse. The boundaries between reality and the void have been eroding for millennia. Without maintenance, they've reached critical weakness. The Void Collective senses this and has begun sending agents to accelerate the process. Stark assessment hung in the morning air, its implications settling over the gathered representatives of different factions. Devils who valued order and hierarchy. Church warriors dedicated to divine mandate. And Issei himself, caught between his human identity and cosmic purpose. What do you propose? Xenovia asked finally, her practical nature asserting itself. Alliance, Issei answered simply. Not between established factions, but between individuals who recognize the greater threat. We need to contact Tiamat, the Chaos Karma Dragon, who may have first-hand knowledge of the Primordial era. We need to locate more fragments of the Blade of Infinity to restore its full power. And we need to strengthen the dimensional boundaries before the void breaches them completely. You're asking us to potentially defy our orders, Irina pointed out, though her tone held more uncertainty than rejection. I'm asking you to fulfill your true purpose, Issei countered. If reality itself unravels, what meaning will faction loyalty have? Xenovia and Irina exchanged a long look, years of partnership allowing silent communication of complex thoughts. Finally, Xenovia turned back to Issei and Rias. We will give you 24 hours before reporting to our superiors, she decided. During that time, we want to see proof, concrete evidence that what you're claiming is real. That seems fair, Rias agreed before Issei could respond. We have means to contact Tiamat, which we were preparing to use before your arrival. You're welcome to observe the attempt. And I can show you more about Durandal's true nature, Issei added, addressing Xenovia specifically. If you're willing to explore its connection to the Blade of Infinity. The blue-haired exorcist nodded curtly. Agreed. As the impromptu alliance moved toward the shrine building to continue their discussion, Issei found his attention repeatedly drawn to Xenovia. Something about her resonated with him beyond the connection to Durandal, a sense of familiarity that transcended their brief acquaintance. The primordial knight stirring within him seemed to recognize her on some fundamental level, as if their meeting was not chance but cosmic inevitability. Another piece of the complex puzzle clicking into place as ancient powers reawakened to confront a threat older than time itself. Chapter 2 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.